So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rahul Kashyap, and I'm here to talk about cybersecurity challenges. I've been fortunate to work with some great people in the industry, and this is basically a summary of some of the mental notes I have made in the process of being an entrepreneur and building companies. So my background is I kind of started off as an exploit writer. My deep offense is kind of how I started off, and then I moved into building products. And as Tushar said, I've been to quite a few companies and really fortunate to work with great people. So happy to be here, and I hope this session is useful for everybody who wants to get into cybersecurity. So, talking about cybersecurity, as you can see, cybersecurity is one of the hottest area right now, and more so, I remember when I joined Bromium in 2011, there were around 300 cybersecurity companies, and now there are over 1,500. So in the last 6 years, there has been a tremendous influx of capital. Several people are kind of focused on cybersecurity right now, and a lot of investment as well. So the question is, why is cybersecurity so fragmented? Why is it that despite the huge amount of investments, why is it that you still keep on hearing bad news in the news? All the time. Somebody's getting hacked, or it's constantly under flux, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of cybersecurity industry, so that if you want to get into cybersecurity, you kind of understand what you're signing up for, literally, right? So the way I describe cybersecurity, it's a multi-dimensional problem. And the reason why, the first simple reason for that is because the internet was not designed for security. It was designed for collaboration, it was designed for sharing, and security is kind of the exact opposite of that, right? So that is kind of the number one challenge, what you face the moment you just go out and start looking at cybersecurity. The second thing is every application, every protocol, every device comes with its own attack surface. What that means is the moment you start adding applications, devices, and forget about humans for a bit, you are increasing the attack surface. Means that there is more code, there are more chances for vulnerabilities, and there are more opportunities for attackers to target that. And then on top of it, if you mix them all, it becomes a multi-dimensional problem, because now you're looking at emails, you're looking at the cloud, you're looking at enterprise desktops and user behaviors and whatnot. So that's kind of why you will see that there are several startups. And it's got all different categories, some of which I have listed here: web, data, cloud, endpoint, network. So it's kind of all over the place right now. And this is kind of one of the reasons why, despite so many companies and so much of influx of capital, still cybersecurity is not really what you can say is solved from that point of view. And talking about the trends of cybercrime, actually it's kind of very interesting. There was this article which came out a couple of years back. I don't know if you have followed this. Officially now, in some parts of the world, cybercrime has overtaken traditional crime, which means that there are literally streets in some parts of Europe where the crime has gone down to single digit, and people are adopting cybercrime. So why is that? Why is it that cybersecurity people are investing? The old age criminals are going to cybersecurity. The simple way of putting that is, I can give you a simple explanation of that. So today I go out on the street, and if I commit a crime, there are cops who will catch me, and I'll be booked, and I'll probably go to jail depending upon my crime, how severe the crime was. But on the internet, there is no police. It's borderless. So I can be sitting in some country out there. I don't know, China, Russia, wherever, and I attack you out here, there is no accountability, and attribution is very hard. So the barrier for the attacker is very low, and the barrier for the defender is very high, right? So I kind of call it a game of odds, and the odds are always and constantly against us, right? So this is the reason why cybersecurity, it's going to get worse. There is no way of this is the next frontier of cybercrime. This is kind of how it's going to evolve. So this is something very important to note, because the more we invest time and resources on the internet, we have to be prepared that there will be cyber criminals going after your assets, simply because they have nothing to lose. So moving ahead, in terms of what are some of the challenges and how to kind of understand the cybersecurity industry a bit. So I've kind of made a few notes here to kind of share some observations, which hopefully will give you an insight on how cybersecurity companies work and what they encounter on a day-to-day basis. The number one challenge is security almost always is an afterthought, right? So how many of you here have like companies, software companies? How many? And how many of you have SDLC programs? You have a dedicated security resource. You have a security program. Very few, right? I mean, probably some of you are mature and you have seen cybersecurity, so you know about it. But fundamentally, right from development to deployment, cybersecurity is always an afterthought. There are some leaders in the industry who are evolving and changing that, but that's kind of the fundamental problem here, right? And the attack surface is constantly growing. We are under pressures to deliver software and deliver it early, before time, and almost always security will be an afterthought because it feels the easy option to optimize on. So that is kind of a fundamental problem which you will encounter if you are trying to build a company. This is something which will always be there. This is a constant problem. It's about optimizing on battle on resources and time. So in some way, I would say that the software industry is the biggest offender, which is actually kind of feeding the cybersecurity and creating the entire cybersecurity ecosystem. It's just because of lack of hygiene and lack of understanding of security principles. So that's kind of the first point I want to bring up. The second one is security issues are not well understood. And I actually would like to share a very interesting encounter I had. This was a year 2000 in my first startup. I had built a technology called Network IDS. This was one of the first of its kind at that time in the industry. And so I went and had to do a pitch to a customer. He was one of the largest services, head of IT. There was no head of security at that time. Head of IT for a large security services company. And I had written an exploit the previous night, and I was able to compromise his web server. And I was trying to sell him a solution saying that this is an IDS, it will block the attack. So, and this is kind of how you prevent the infection. So, so he saw through my entire pitch. We were there for like 45 minutes, and towards the end, he says, "I can solve this problem for free. I don't need your solution." So we were like looking at each other like, what's going on? What is this genius idea? So he goes, he stands up, goes and reboots the server, and he says, problem solve. So this is kind of, obviously this was in 17 years back where the persistence of malware wasn't prevalent. You could reboot the system and think you have solved the problem. Now it is not so. But the reality is still the same. Security problems and challenges are not well understood. And for a lot of people, they think that buying a product will kind of solve the problem, and that is not the case as well. So that is something which you will kind of always encounter, and I always still encounter that when I kind of in my current company and in my last few startups as well. So the next thing is the threat landscape. So this is the unique thing about cybersecurity is the threat landscape is always changing. And it kind of approximately 4 to 7 years, it pretty much shifts dramatically. I can say that. So for example, one very good example of that is the classic antivirus. It was pretty effective like 15 years ago, and now it is not very effective. And similarly, when the cyber security industry started in the early 2000s, the attacks were very different type. They were like the slammer worms, the code red, Nimda worm. It was all worms propagation on the server side. That attack vector is almost gone now. Now it's all about humans, phishing. The entire threat landscape has dramatically changed. And what that also means is your products which were relevant for that threat landscape become less and less relevant and less effective. And then the challenge is, how do you replace them? How do you displace them? So that's kind of a constant problem which you will encounter if you're building a new solution. And the other thing is that this threat landscape changes only if you're in security world, you are aware of these changes, of these challenges. It is not obvious to the end users. It's very subtle, right? So that's something, again, goes back to the fact that the lack of awareness is also a problem. The next thing, and this is kind of an interesting one, is compliance. So one of the reason why compliance was created was to help create a minimum standard and establish a minimum criteria for security or whatever it is, right? But a lot of people associate compliance as security. Being compliant doesn't mean that you are more secure. And people have this misconception that, oh, I've got that PCI checkbox, so I'm safe. In some cases, it is genuine lack of awareness, and in some cases, they just want to optimize and save time and money and resources, right? So compliance is a challenge for any entrepreneur because it is setting the bar to the bare minimum for the buyer. And if you have an advanced solution, people will never, it will be very hard for you to sell that because the bar is set so low. So that's kind of another aspect of compliance. I keep on always encountering the compliance issue all the time. And this typically comes with larger companies, who are very compliance heavy, who only care about the check boxes. So yeah, so that's another, I would say, challenge. The next thing is attacks. So this is something I'll talk about in a little bit more details. Are attacks really that sophisticated? The kind of attacks you hear in the media, is it really that bad? Is it like some black voodoo, black magic going on here, right? It's not so. Most of the attacks are not sophisticated. It is just the failure of legacy software in combating them. That's kind of the actual reality. And I'll talk about that in details a little bit more because that's a very important aspect. So those are some of the, I would say, 5 areas to kind of look out for in terms of understanding the cybersecurity industry. So next, as an entrepreneur, where do you start? What are, if you have a great idea and you want to build a company, how do you get started? So first of all, you must have a expertise from the security industry in your team, somebody who has broken software or who has been in the security industry in terms of building R&D projects and so on, because otherwise you kind of don't have a sense of all of those subtle issues which you will probably miss and find later. Second thing is there are several security issues. You have to kind of, and if you go to customers, most customers will talk about symptoms. And symptoms, if you try to solve the symptom, you will end up building a feature. But if you try to spend time understanding what is it that their real problem is and try to understand the root cause, you will end up building a product. So you have to iterate with customers and because nobody really exactly knows what is their real problem, but people mostly talk about symptoms. So don't get caught into solving symptoms, but try to get into solving the actual problem. Next is identifying the attack vector. There are several ways you can solve the problem. So what are the key attack vectors that you really care about? And what do you want to address? The biggest challenge and the problem is people want to solve everything. because as a startup entrepreneur, you feel invincible and you want to do it all right. So that is the biggest challenge which you have to watch out for. Second thing is, to be successful in cybersecurity industry and to really build a big scalable company, you have to displace something. The market forces will push you in the direction where you say, we will augment you. You will be one more layer, but as you grow your business, you will find that until you displace a legacy technology, or you create a new, completely new category of attacks you cover, you cannot build a big company, because you'll always be like a small niche, good to have capability. So that's very important as well. And the other and the last piece, I think, in this is look at the software disruptive trends. This is kind of important. For example, as I mentioned, security is always an afterthought, which means that if there is a trend where a real category in the industry is being created, the security will follow in that trend very soon. And there are enough evidences of that. Mobile, cloud, and now IoT, right? All of these verticals were created first, and then cybersecurity became an interesting problem. So look out for trends in the industry, what is emerging as a real trend and as a real category, and then security will follow, and it has happened every time. Next is understanding these sophisticated attacks. This is kind of, again, first of all, 90% of the attacks are not sophisticated. The buffer overflows have been there for decades. The obfuscation of attacks has been there for many, many years. Stealing of credentials, eavesdropping, hijacking, these are all standard techniques used by attackers. There is nothing fundamentally different. The only thing is your perspective. Don't let the hype deter you, saying that this is too hard a problem to solve. That is not the case. It is all about perspective. It's your approach that determines the complexity. Like, for example, if you're looking at the latest and greatest piece of malware, trying to reverse engineer it, and then you look at every piece of malware, it's a very complicated problem, because every malware will be different, right? So it is the approach which actually creates a perspective of complexity. So, but in reality, most of the attackers are pretty much repackaged, and they are just tried in different variants, that's all. So it is not that hard. Again, I don't want to undermine the challenge and the problem, but at the same time, it's not. It doesn't live up to the hype what you hear in the news. So next, some traps and pitfalls. I kind of made a few lists which I've learned from my own experiences. Number one is there is no 100% security. So a lot of people try to attempt that, building that silver bullet, but the reality is, don't try to do that. And it kind of sounds almost off. Because I'm trying to asking you to build a solution, but at the same time I'm saying that it will never be 100% accurate, right? So this is the trap and pitfall to watch out for. One more is end user experience. If you have to be invisible as a security product. If you are not, you will definitely people won't like it, and you'll be taken out very soon. The next one is the human factor. This is kind of a very, very critical piece as well. You can put all products in one place, and then comes in my father-in-law who likes to click on every free iPad link. That will just blow everything off. So there are these are few traps and pitfalls which you have to watch out, because there is no clear solution. You have to always factor those in, and these are always going to be a challenge which will always be there. So in terms of winding up, I had kind of created several ideas in terms of emerging trends and solutions. There are very interesting technologies emerging, ranging from segmentation in the data center, blockchain, which can disrupt a pretty large set of verticals, ranging from IoT and even healthcare. There are several interesting technologies which are emerging. But what I would like to kind of bring up and this is kind of my last slide, is the role of AI and machine learning. So this has the potential to disrupt pretty much every every dimension of security. And I myself am in a company building a solution on the endpoint, but we are brainstorming on several other capabilities. This is something which is a new emerging trend. AI enables you to build more efficient solutions, lightweight, and you're kind of learning from the past, and you're able to predict the future if you have a good modeling, which you have built out. So yeah, so this is kind of and this is just the beginning of AI. We are kind of just, AI is just touching cybersecurity now. I think we have a lot of fun times ahead in terms of disrupting several verticals there. So that's pretty much my last slide.
We have time for 2 questions.
Yeah. So document sharing in the cloud, is your question? Right. So are you worried about like sensitive data being leaked out? Yeah. So you could build several interesting models around there where you can identify what are your critical assets and in terms of your sensitive data. Are you looking at documents or just files in general? Data in general? Yeah, I mean, there are several players like cloud security access brokers. There are technologies there which enable you that. So you could probably look at some of those capabilities. I can probably understand your use case in detail and answer that probably offline. Yeah.
One more. Can you guys hear me from this? Okay.
Yeah.
One more question. Yes. Let me take the mic to the person. Not you. Anybody else? Okay, let's have one.
How do you solve the human problem? It's the weakest link in cybersecurity.
Yes.
Have you seen anything develop around the human layer at all?
I mean, there have been several attempts to solve that, but I don't see any clear solution. So you have to factor the human problem in whatever you build. So that has to be at the design of human interaction. So there have been several attempts, but I haven't seen anything which really solves the human problem per se.
Okay, I'll speak to you offline to see, pick your brains.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Rahul. Greatly appreciated.